The night sky over the alien city was filled with strange lights. Tall towers glowed with colors that were not natural. The streets below were crowded with voices, footsteps, and the sound of chains. It was the night of the slave market, the place where lives were sold like objects. The air was heavy. A smell of dust, smoke, and fear floated around. Beings from many different worlds filled the market. Some were tall with shining skin, some had claws, others wore masks that hid their faces. They all gathered for one reason, to buy new slaves. At the center stood the auction stage. Wooden beams creaked as the auctioneer, a fat alien with 3 eyes and a long mouth, shouted loudly. He raised his arm and pointed at the next slave brought forward. It was a girl. She looked young, her body thin and weak. Her skin was pale, her arms covered with marks from ropes and whips. She kept her head low, her black hair falling over her face. Around her ankles were chains that clinked every time she moved. The crowd stared, but no one raised a hand. The auctioneer forced a smile. "Look here, a fine catch. Strong enough to work, silent enough not to argue," he lied. His voice was loud but empty. He could feel the crowd losing interest. Buyers wanted strength, beauty, or special skills. This girl looked broken. She did not speak, she did not fight, she only stood like a shadow. Whispers spread among the buyers. "She is weak, not worth even a single coin. Throw her away." The auctioneer's smile dropped. Sweat rolled down his face. No bids came. Other slaves before her were sold quickly. Fighters, workers, even singers. But this girl? Nobody wanted her. He pulled her by the arm, forcing her to look up. Her eyes flashed in the torchlight, strange glowing eyes, deep and endless, like they were hiding a story. For a moment, the crowd grew silent, then laughter broke out. "Her eyes are cursed," one alien shouted. "She will bring bad luck," another added. "Better to feed her to the beasts." The auctioneer grew angry. He banged his stick on the stage. "Somebody must take her. Do not waste my time." But still no one moved. The girl lowered her gaze again, her lips pressed tight as if she already knew her fate. At the edge of the crowd, a human stood. He wore simple clothes, dusty boots, and carried no fine weapons. His face was tired, but his eyes were calm. He had been watching quietly since the market began. When others laughed at the girl, he did not laugh. When others turned away, he kept looking. He saw something different. The auctioneer raised his voice once more. "If no one wants her, she will be thrown into the pits. Last chance." He grabbed the girl's arm harder, making her stumble. The chains rattled. The crowd began to move on, already calling for the next slave. And then it happened. A clear voice cut through the noise. It was calm, steady, but it carried weight. "I'll claim her." The words stopped everyone. Heads turned. The crowd fell silent. The auctioneer blinked with his 3 eyes. "What did you say, human?" The man stepped forward. His boots tapped the wooden floor of the stage. He reached into his pocket and dropped a small bag of coins onto the table. The sound of metal hitting wood rang out. "I'll take her," he said again, his voice firm. Laughter exploded from the crowd. "A human wants the cursed one? He must be a fool. Look at him. He is poor. He cannot even feed himself." The auctioneer licked his lips. He did not care who bought her, only that someone did. He quickly took the coins. "Fine, human. She is yours. But do not return her when she brings you sorrow." The man ignored the words. He stepped closer to the girl. Her chains were heavy, cutting into her skin. Slowly, carefully, he unlocked them, one by one. The metal dropped with a sharp sound onto the stage. She did not move, only stared at him with those strange glowing eyes. For the first time, her lips parted. She whispered, something so soft only he could hear, but he did not understand the language. Still, he gave her a small piece of bread from his pocket and held out a water flask. The girl hesitated. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. The water touched her lips and she drank like she had not tasted water in days. The crowd's laughter grew louder, but the man did not care. All around them, whispers spread. Why would a human claim such a worthless slave? What was he planning? Did he know something others did not? The girl's eyes met his again. They glowed faintly, not with fear this time, but with a question. Why him? Why now? As the crowd mocked and shouted, neither of them spoke. But in that silent stare, something unspoken passed between them. And in the shadows, far away from the stage, a pair of hidden eyes watched, cold, sharp, and merciless. The hunter whispered to his partner, "He has taken her. This changes everything." The market slowly emptied, but whispers about the human still floated in the air. He walked through the narrow streets, the alien girl following behind him. Her steps were slow, her bare feet scraping against the rough stones. She was no longer chained, but her body still carried the memory of shackles. He led her away from the torches, away from the noise, into the darker part of the city. Strange shadows moved across the walls, alien shapes that watched but did not speak. The man glanced back at her. "Keep close," he said softly. She did not answer. She only stared, her glowing eyes catching the faint light of the moons above. Those eyes made him uneasy, but also curious. They held stories she refused to tell. They stopped near a small inn at the edge of the city. Its walls were cracked, and its windows flickered with weak light. The human pushed open the door, nodding to the innkeeper, a four-armed creature who squinted suspiciously at the GI. "Room?" the innkeeper grunted. "One night," the human replied, placing a few coins on the counter. The innkeeper's gaze lingered on the girl, then on the human. He leaned closer and whispered, "You don't know what you're carrying, do you?" The human ignored him, taking the key, but his mind did not forget those words. Inside the small room, the girl sat on the floor, curled up against the wall. She touched her wrists where the chains had cut deep. The human placed bread and a cup of water on the table, then sat across from her. "You're safe here," he said. Still no answer. Her silence filled the room like heavy smoke. After a long pause, she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, broken, and carried an accent unfamiliar to him. "Why?" she asked. He frowned. "Why what?" "Why, claim me?" Her glowing eyes met his. Others laughed. "They knew I am nothing." The man leaned back, rubbing his tired face. "You're not nothing." But even as he said it, he wondered why he had stepped forward at the market. Why had he spoken when everyone else turned away? He was not rich. He was not strong. And yet, something in her eyes had pulled him. Silence again. The girl pulled her knees to her chest. She whispered something in her language, too soft for him to understand. That night, the human tried to rest, but the city outside was loud with voices, footsteps, and arguments. He lay awake, listening. The girl did not sleep either. She sat still, watching the door like she expected enemies to come. And she was not wrong. In the shadows outside, two alien hunters crouched on the rooftop. Their armor glowed faintly, their weapons sharp and ready. One of them held a small device showing the girl's face. "She was not destroyed," one hunter hissed. "No," the human interfered, the other replied. "Orders are clear. She must not live. We move at dawn." Back in the room, the human Inali drifted into sleep, but the girl remained awake. She pressed her palm against her wrist where the burned mark lay hidden beneath her skin. A faint hum pulsed from it, a rhythm only she could feel. Her heart raced. She remembered the voices of her past, the screams, the fire, the fall of her people. She remembered the chains, the market, the laughter. And now this strange human who had claimed her. Why would he risk himself? Did he know the truth about her? The next morning, the human rose early. He gave her food again, half of his own share. She ate slowly, watching him. "We'll leave the city today," he said. "Too many eyes here." She tilted her head, studying him. "You are not like the others." He smiled faintly. "That's good, isn't it?" For the first time, a tiny spark crossed her face, something like a smile, though it vanished quickly. As they walked through the streets, whispers followed them. Other aliens sneered, pointing at the human with the pale girl at his side. Some laughed. Others looked away in fear. By the time they reached the gates, the hunters were already waiting in the crowd, hidden, patient, watching. The girl suddenly froze. Her glowing eyes darted left, then right. Her hand clutched his sleeve. Her voice trembled. "They are here." The human turned sharply. "Who?" She swallowed hard. Her words came slow, each one heavy with fear. "They will never stop. Not until I am gone." He stared at her, realizing for the first time that she was not just a slave. She was something else, something dangerous, something hunted. The crowd pressed closer. The hunter's eyes glowed red as they moved through the people. The human reached for the rusty blade at his belt, his jaw tightening. And the girl whispered, almost like a warning, "You should leave me. If you stay, they will kill you too." The human looked down at her, then back at the hunters drawing near. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. "No, I claimed you. That means I'll protect you." The girl's eyes widened, shocked by his words. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her, not out of greed, not out of cruelty, but out of something she did not yet understand. The hunters stepped closer, their weapons shining. The crowd began to scatter in fear, and in that moment, the human stood tall, blade in hand, shielding the girl behind him. The fight for survival had begun. The street exploded into chaos. Shouts filled the air as the hunters lunged forward, their weapons slicing through the crowd. Beings scattered in panic, overturning stalls, dropping baskets of strange glowing fruit. The human gripped his rusty blade, heart pounding as he pulled the girl behind him. The hunters were fast, their armor gleaming like black stone, their movements sharp as blades. One swung down at the human, but he ducked low, the weapon scraping sparks against the cobblestones. He countered with his blade, but it barely left a mark on the alien's armor. The girl clutched his arm. Her glowing eyes widened with fear. She whispered something in her strange language, words that sounded like a prayer, or maybe a warning. The second hunter raised a weapon shaped like a curved staff. It pulsed with blue light before striking forward. The blast hit the wall beside them, leaving a burning hole. The crowd screamed louder, pushing each other to escape. The human gasped for breath, sweat dripping down his face. He knew he could not hold them off for long. He was only a man with a dull blade. They were killers, trained and armed. Still, he refused to move aside. The girl's hands trembled as she held her wrist, the one with the burned mark. The hum inside her skin grew stronger. She tried to fight it back, but her body shook. She remembered the voices of her people, the fire, the day she was taken. The hunters had come for her before, and now they had come again. The human swung wildly, his blade crashing against the hunter's arm. The alien laughed, its deep voice echoing in the street. "Weak!" it hissed. The other hunter raised the staff again, aiming for the girl. The human's eyes widened. He threw himself in front of her, ready to take the blast. But the strike never landed. The girl screamed, a sound ripped out of her chest, sharp and full of fear. In that instant, the burned mark on her wrist blazed with light. A wave of energy burst from her body, slamming into the hunters and throwing them back into the walls. The street shook. Dust and broken stone rained down. The hunters groaned, trying to rise, their armor cracked where the energy had struck. The girl stared at her hands in shock. They glowed faintly, pulsing with strange power. She had tried to bury it, to hide it, but it had escaped. The human turned to her, eyes wide. "What? What was that?" Her breathing was ragged, her eyes full of tears. "They will never stop," she whispered. "Because of me, because of what I am." The hunters struggled back to their feet, snarling, but the blast had bought them time. The human grabbed her hand and pulled her into the narrow alleyways. They ran fast, their footsteps echoing against stone. The city behind them still roared with confusion, but the hunters would not stop. She knew it. He knew it. When they finally reached a quiet corner, the girl collapsed against the wall, clutching her wrist. The light from the mark slowly faded. The human crouched beside her. "You're not just some slave," he said, his voice low but steady. Her lips trembled. She looked away, shame covering her face. "I am the last," she whispered. "The last of my blood. They killed all others. Only I remain." He frowned. "Last of what?" She hesitated, as if speaking would summon danger. At last she answered, "Last of the line they fear. My family ruled once, long ago. The hunters were sent to end it, to erase us." The human sat back, his mind racing. He had not expected this. He thought he had rescued a broken girl, unwanted and weak. But now he understood why the market wanted her gone, why no one dared to buy her. She was not worthless. She was dangerous. The girl hugged her knees, her voice trembling. "I should have died with them. If I stay with you, they will kill you too. Leave me." The human stared at her for a long moment. He could see the weight she carried, the fear that ruled her, but he shook his head firmly. "No, I claimed you. That means I stay." Her glowing eyes lifted slowly, meeting his. There was no laughter in his face, no greed, no cruelty, only determination. She did not understand it. She had never known it. Far above, the hunters regrouped on the rooftops, their red eyes fixed on the streets below. One hissed, "She has awakened." The other snarled, "Then we will strike harder. She cannot escape us again." Back in the alley, the girl pressed her forehead to her knees. The human leaned against the wall beside her, blade still in his hand. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence between them was heavy, but not empty. It was the silence of two lives suddenly tied together, bound by choice, by danger, and by something neither of them yet understood. At last the girl whispered, almost too soft to hear, "My name is Lyra." The human glanced at her, surprised. Until now she had been only the girl. Hearing her name felt like the beginning of something larger, something dangerous, something impossible to turn back from. He nodded slowly. "I'm Kael." Two names in the darkness, spoken like a promise. And from the shadows beyond, the hunters moved closer, blades ready, eyes burning with fury. The night deepened over the alien city. Twin moons hung low in the sky, their pale glow spilling across broken rooftops and narrow alleys. Somewhere in that darkness, two fugitives moved in silence, a human and the alien girl he had claimed. Kyle walked ahead, blade ready in his hand. Lyra followed closely, her glowing eyes sweeping every shadow. The memory of the hunters still burned in her mind, their black armor, their merciless eyes, their promise of death. "They won't stop," she whispered. Kyle glanced back at her. "Then we don't stop either." His voice was steady, but his heart pounded. He had seen their power. He had felt their strength. No weapon he carried could truly kill them, yet he refused to let go of the girl now. From above, the hunters tracked them. The rooftops bent under their weight as they leapt from one to the next, silent as wolves. Their armor glowed faintly, their blades thirsty for blood. One spoke in a cold hiss. "The girl's power is awakening. If it grows, we fail." The other growled, "Then we end the human first. He is only flesh." The hunters moved swiftly, their steps matching the fugitives below. Kale and Lyra stopped near an abandoned warehouse at the city's edge. The door creaked as Kale pushed it open. Inside, broken crates and rusted tools lay scattered. Dust floated in the air. It was quiet, too quiet. "Rest here," Kale said, "at least until dawn." Lyra hesitated. Her instincts screamed danger, but her body was weak. The blast she had released earlier had drained her. She sat against a wall, pulling her knees to her chest. Kale searched the shadows, every sense alert. He had survived many battles in his life, but this felt different. He was not fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for her. Moments passed. Then, from the darkness above, a sound, soft, like claws scraping stone. Kale turned sharply, blade raised. The hunters dropped from the rafters. Their armored forms landed with heavy thuds, dust rising around them. Red eyes glowed through their helmets. One raised its curved staff, the other unsheathed twin blades. "Give her to us," one hissed, "and your death will be swift." Kale tightened his grip on the blade. "Not happening." The hunter laughed, a cruel metallic sound. "Foolish human, she is a curse. She brings only ruin." Kyle stood his ground. Behind him, Lee. Ra's body shook. She pressed her hand against the mark on her wrist, but no light came. She had no strength left. The first hunter charged, blades flashing. Kale blocked with his rusty sword, sparks flying. The impact rattled his arms, nearly knocking the weapon free. He staggered, barely holding on. The second hunter swung its staff, sending a pulse of energy across the floor. The blast threw Kale back into a pile of crates. Wood shattered, pain ripped through his body. Blood filled his mouth, but he forced himself to rise. "Kale!" Lyra cried, her voice breaking. The hunters closed in. One aimed for Kale's throat, the other for Lyra's chest. Something inside her snapped, fear twisted into fury. She screamed, not in weakness but in defiance. Her wrist blazed with light. The mark burned like fire, flooding the warehouse with white energy. The hunters froze, shielding their eyes. A shockwave erupted from Lyra, slamming into the walls, shaking the ground. Crates burst apart, dust and fire rained down. The hunters staggered, armor cracking under the force. Kale shielded his face, the energy washing over him. When the light faded, he saw Lyra standing, not broken, not silent, but glowing with a fierce, terrifying power. Her eyes burned like twin stars. Her voice, though soft, carried across the room. "I will not run anymore." The hunters hissed in rage. One dropped to its knees, armor sparking. The other steadied itself, fury in its red eyes. "She awakens," it spat. "But she cannot control it. She will destroy herself, and you with her." Lyra's body trembled. She swayed, her glow flickering. Kale rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. "Don't push yourself," he whispered. Tears slid down her face. "You should leave me. They will keep coming. If you stay, you'll die." Kale shook his head, tightening his grip on her. His voice was quiet but firm. "If Eth comes, it comes, but I'm not leaving you." The hunters snarled, dragging themselves upright. Their weapons hummed with power. They would not stop. Kyle helped Lyra to her feet. Together they stood side by side, facing the hunters. She leaned on him, her power barely contained. He lifted his blade, broken but steady. For the first time, Lyra looked at him not with fear, but with something else. Trust. The warehouse filled with silence, heavy as stone. The hunters circled, blades glowing. Kyle and Lyra stood ready, two fragile figures against unstoppable killers. The night held its breath. And then the hunters attacked. The warehouse was left in ruins. Shattered beams and broken stones smoked in the moonlight, while sparks still hissed from the hunters' damaged armor. Kale leaned against the doorway, his breath ragged, his blade bent almost beyond use. Beside him, Lyra clutched his arm, her body trembling but still standing. They had survived the night, barely. Kael glanced down at her. Her glowing eyes no longer held just fear. They carried something new, uncertainty, yes, but also trust. For the first time, she had not stood alone. They left the city before dawn, slipping past its sleeping gates. The road stretched out into the wilderness, a wasteland of red stone and jagged cliffs. Silence followed them, broken only by the crunch of Kael's boots and Lyra's softer steps. After hours of walking, Kael finally stopped. He sank onto a rock, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We need to rest." Lyra lowered herself carefully, sitting nearby. For a long while, neither spoke. The desert wind whistled across the cliffs. At last, Kael said, "You saved me back there." She looked at him surprised. "No, you saved me." Kael shook his head. "I couldn't have stood against them alone. That power of yours, it's the only reason we're alive." Her hands tightened in her lap. "It is not power, it is a curse. Wherever I go, death follows. That is why they hunt me. That is why I should have been left to die." Kael studied her. She meant the words. He could, to hear the weight of them. But he also remembered the way she had stood, glowing like fire, refusing to run. He leaned forward, his voice steady. "Lyra, a curse doesn't fight to protect someone. You did. That wasn't just power. That was choice." She blinked, her lips parting as if she wanted to argue, but no sound came. Instead, she lowered her gaze. Something inside her softened. They shared the bread and water he carried, small rations but enough to keep moving. Lyra ate slowly, as if she had forgotten what it felt like not to starve. Kael watched her, then finally let himself smile. "You're getting stronger already," he said. A faint smile touched her lips before she hid it behind her hands. It was gone quickly, but Kael noticed. By nightfall, they reached a small outpost, nothing more than tents, fires, and tired travelers. Kael rented a corner of shelter with the last of his coins. Lyra sat beside him, watching the flames of a cooking fire. Others around the camp whispered. Some recognized her face. Word of the slave market had already spread. The human who bought the cursed girl, the girl who should have been dead. Rebels sat close by, eyes sharp with interest. They leaned toward each other, speaking in low voices. "Could it be true?" one asked. "The lost bloodline? Alive? And with a human?" Kael caught the whispers but said nothing. He only pulled his cloak tighter around Lyra, shielding her from the stares. Later that night, one of the rebels approached their fire. He was tall, scarred, and carried no weapon in his hands, though Kael could see the knife strapped to his belt. "You," the man said, nodding at Lyra. "Your eyes, they are not ordinary." Lyra stiffened. Kael rose, placing himself between them. "She's not your concern." The man tilted his head. "You don't understand what she means. If she is who I think she is, she could be the key to Sos, anything greater." Kael narrowed his eyes. "Or another way for people to use her." The rebel's mouth curved into a grim smile. "Perhaps, but word will spread. People will hear. You cannot stop it." He turned and walked back into the shadows, leaving Kael unsettled. When Kael looked at Lyra, she was hugging her knees again, her face pale. "They know," she whispered. "It will not stop now." He crouched down beside her. "Then we keep moving. We find somewhere safe." Her glowing eyes met his. "Why? Why do you risk this? You could leave me, and they would let you live." Kael paused. He thought of all the times he had been alone, wandering from place to place with nothing but an old blade and tired hands. He thought of the market, the chains, and her eyes when she had first looked at him. Finally he answered, "Because someone has to stand with you, and if no one else will, then I will." The silence between them grew heavy again, but this time it was warm, not cold. Lyra's lips trembled, and for the first time since he had met her, she allowed herself to lean against him. She whispered so quietly he almost didn't hear it. "Then maybe I am not cursed." Kael's chest tightened, but he said nothing. He only let her rest against his shoulder, watching the fire burn low. From the far side of the camp, the rebels whispered still, their eyes bright with new hope. Among the slaves, the broken, the forgotten, rumors spread. The lost heir had returned, and a human stood at her side. By morning, a bounty was placed across the outpost networks. Messages carried through alien skies flashing on hidden screens. Wanted, the girl with the cursed eyes, the human with her, dead or alive. The desert sun burned red across the horizon as Kyle and Lyra entered the rebel camp. Dozens of tents stood against the wind, patched together from scraps of cloth and metal. Smoke from small fires curled into the sky. The rebels looked tired, but their eyes were sharp, their movements careful. When the pair arrived, whispers followed them like shadows. Some rebels sinked. Ard at Kale's bent blade, others at Lyra's glowing eyes. Rumors of the cursed girl had already reached the camp. Kale walked with his hand on the hilt of his sword, never lowering his guard. Lyra kept close, her face hidden under a hood. She could feel the stares. Some carried hope, others carried fear. The rebel leader, a woman named Sarah, stepped forward. Her hair was silver, her face scarred, and her voice carried strength. "You've brought trouble," she said to Kyle, though her gaze was fixed on Lyra. Kale replied calm but firm, "We need shelter, nothing more." Sarah studied Lyra for a long moment. "Those eyes, they are not ordinary." Lyra lowered her head. "They are a curse," she whispered. Sarah's lips tightened. "Or they are a symbol, a reminder of what was lost." She motioned for them to follow. Against Kyle's unease, they were given a tent and a place by the fire. For the first time in days, Lyra tasted warm food, though she ate little. The weight of watching eyes never left her. As night fell, Kyle sat sharpening his ruined blade. Lyra rested nearby, her wrist still aching from the mark that burned when she used her power. Around them, rebels gathered in small groups, speaking in low voices. Some spoke of freedom, others spoke of danger. One voice, sharp and bitter, cut through the whispers. A young rebel spat into the dirt. "She'll bring the hunters here. She'll kill us all." Another answered, "Or save us. Don't you see? If she truly is the heir, then maybe we can rise again." The camp grew divided. Half believed she was hope, half believed she was doom. Lyra curled into herself, shaking. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ignore them," he said softly. Her glowing eyes lifted to his. "They are not wrong. I bring danger." Kale met her gaze. "And I've faced danger my whole life. This isn't different." But in his heart, he knew it was. That night, as the camp settled into uneasy silence, betrayal crept like smoke through the shadows. A rebel slipped from the firelight, clutching a small communicator. His voice trembled as he whispered into it. "They are here. The girl and the human. I'll mark the camp. Bring your hunters." The device flashed once, sending the signal. Far beyond the cliffs, in the stillness of the desert, a warship stirred. Red lights blinked alive. Engines roared, shaking the ground. The hunters had their prey. Back at camp, Kale woke with a start. A sound, distant, low, like thunder. He stepped outside the tent, eyes narrowing. The horizon glowed faintly red. "Lyra," he said, urgency in his tone. She stumbled out, her hood falling back, her glowing eyes wide. "They're coming." The rebels stirred in alarm. Some grabbed weapons, others ran for cover. Shouts filled the camp as the sound grew louder. The first strike came fast. A beam of fire tore from the sky, smashing into the edge of the camp. Tents exploded in flame. Sand and bodies flew through the air. The ground shook with violence. Chaos erupted. Rebels screamed, scattering. Some shouted orders, others only fled. Smoke choked the air. Kale grabbed Lyra's hand. "Stay with me," he shouted, pulling her through the burning camp. The hunters descended from the ship, their armor glowing red in the firelight. Blades and staffs crackled with energy. They cut through rebels like shadows slicing through flame. Sarah, the rebel leader, fought fiercely, shouting for her people to stand. But the hunters were merciless. For every rebel that rose, 2 fell. Kale swung his bent blade against a hunter, sparks flying. The impact jolted his arms, but he forced the alien back a step. "Go, Lyra," he yelled. She froze, trembling, the mark on her wrist pulsing with heat. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Kale roared. Tears streaked her face. She raised her hand, light flaring, but before she could release it, a blast from a staff slammed into Kale's chest. He crashed into the sand, blood on his lips. "Kale!" Lyra reamed. She dropped to her knees beside him, her small hands pressing against his wounds. Her body shook. Fear turned to rage. The hunters closed in, their weapons raised. "End it," one hissed. Lyra's eyes glowed bright, her scream tearing through the flames. Power burst from her body, a storm of light ripping through the camp. Hunters staggered back, armor cracking, weapons shattering. The ground itself trembled beneath her fury. When the light faded, silence fell. Smoke rose in thick clouds. The camp was in ruins, bodies and fire scattered everywhere. Kyle lay still, his chest rising faintly, but his face pale. Lyra's glowing eyes dimmed as she collapsed beside him, clutching his hand. Through the smoke, the hunters regrouped, blood and fire staining their armor. One pointed at the girl, voice dripping with hatred. "She cannot be allowed to live." The other raised its blade. "Next time, no mercy." They retreated into the smoke, vanishing into the night. Lyra wept silently, her hand never leaving Kale's. Around her, the rebel camp lay in ashes. The fire still burned, and so did her heart. The camp was nothing but smoke and ruin. The flames had died down to embers, but the air still carried the smell of ash and blood. The rebels who survived wandered like ghosts among the wreckage, their faces pale, their voices silent. In the center of the destruction, Lyra knelt beside Kyle. His chest rose slowly, each breath a painful struggle. His blade lay broken beside him, blackened by fire. She held his hand tightly, her glowing eyes dim with exhaustion and grief. "You should not have stayed," she whispered, tears falling onto his face. "I told you they would kill you." But Kale's lips moved faintly, his voice barely a whisper. "I said I wouldn't leave you." Her heart broke. Even on the edge of death, he thought not of himself, but of her. Around them, the rebels there, weak and wounded. Some looked at Lyra with fear, others with desperate hope. The blast she had released had destroyed nearly everything, but it had also saved those who still lived. Sarah, scarred and bleeding, staggered toward her. The rebel leader's eyes burned with fire even as her body shook. She looked at Kael, then at Lyra. "He fought for you," Sarah said, "and you fought for us. If you are truly who they say you are, then you must choose." Lyra's lips trembled. "Choose?" Sarah pointed to the survivors, the broken rebels clinging to life, the ones who had lost everything but still stood. "The hunters will come again. The Empire will come again. They will not stop until you are gone. But if you rise, if you lead, we may have a chance." Lyra shook her head quickly. "I am not a leader. I am not strong. I am—" Kale's hand squeezed hers weakly, cutting off her words. She turned, eyes wide. He was awake, his gaze steady despite the pain. "You are not weak," he whispered. "I've seen you fight. I've seen you protect. You are more than what they call you." His words cut deep. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not her captors, not the market, not even her own people before they fell. They had called her cursed, dangerous, a reminder of failure, but Kael saw something else. The rebels waited, their eyes on her. Some knelt, their heads bowed, not out of fear but out of recognition. Lyra's chest tightened. The mark on her wrist pulsed, faint but steady. For the first time, she did not fight it. She lifted her head, and her glowing eyes shone bright against the smoke. She rose to her feet, still holding Kael's hand. Her voice trembled, but each word grew stronger. "I am not property. I am not a curse. I am the last of my line, and I will not hide anymore." The rebels stirred, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Sarah bowed her head slightly, respect in her scarred face. Lyra raised her hand, and the mark glowed faintly, casting light across the ruins. "The hunters want me dead, the Empire wants me forgotten, but I am still her, and I am not alone." Her gaze fell on Kael. His eyes met hers, weak but filled with pride. "You," she whispered to him. "You gave me strength when I had none. You stood when no one else would. I will not let your fight be wasted." She turned back to the rebels. "If you will follow me, then together we will rise, not as slaves, not as shadows, but as free." The camp erupted, not in cheers, but in something deeper. A quiet roar of hope, a sound of people remembering they were still alive, still able to fight. Far above, hidden ships carried the hunters' message back to their masters. Across the galaxy, whispers spread through black markets, rebel cells, and broken colonies. The air lives, and a human stands with her. Back at the camp, Lyra knelt again beside Kael. She touched his face gently, her tears falling onto his skin. "You didn't buy me," she whispered. "You saved me." Kael tried to smile, his voice a rasp. "Then, save them." Her heart swelled with both pain and resolve. She pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "I will." That night, the rebels buried their dead, tended to their wounded, and prepared for what was to come. The fires burned low, but the fire in their hearts had only begun to rise. And in the silence between the stars, the galaxy shifted. The hunters had failed. The Empire would not ignore it. War was coming. But so was hope. The story of a human and a cursed girl had only just begun.